Come on, let's give him some praise. He is worthy to be praised. Thank God for this preaching hour. We ask that you would pray with us and pray for us. Stand with me for the reading of God's word. We're not going to be long. There's some preaching. Turn with me to the book of John, chapter 6, verse 16 down to verse 21. That's two passages of scriptures we will use today, but we will only read one of them. John chapter 6, verse 16 down to verse 21. And when you get home, you can read the book of Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 down to verse 27. But for this preaching hour, we want to look at the book of John, chapter 6, verse 16 down to verse 21. Are you there?
Yes.
Notice what the text says. And when Eve was now come, his disciples went down unto the sea, and entered into a ship, and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was now dark, and Jesus was not come to them. And the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew. So when they had rowed about 5 or 20 or 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the ship, and they were afraid. But he said unto them, It is I, be not afraid. Then he said unto them, It is I, once again, be not afraid. Then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at land, whither they went. I want to talk about today what to expect on this journey in a storm. Are you going to help me?
Yes.
What to expect on this journey in a storm. The day in which this text took place was the most remarkably day of the Master. It was a day that began with teaching, and it moved from teaching to feeding, from feeding to praying, from praying to deliverance. John says the Master had been hard at teaching and training. And as the day come to a close, he said to his disciples, as we take the text down from the top of John chapter 6 to verse 5, where shall we buy meat that these may eat? Notice, church, it's not a question of where we will buy it, but what we will buy it with. And so many are asking that question today who are filling and flooding up the unemployment line. They're not asking where we will buy it, but what we will buy is with. Unemployment is at all-time high. People everywhere is standing in line for food. Hospitals are filled with HIV patients. They're dying in the streets. They're dying at home, in hospitals, in nursing homes. Across the nurses and doctors, they are crowned and tied, and they're working their fingers to the bone. Even when your cup barrel in your home is empty and there's no food on the table and there's no means of providing, and then it becomes a matter of what I will buy it with. But now, according to the text today, 200 pennies, church, work is not enough. Because that's all some may take a little and go back home, according to verse 9 and verse 8 in John. But Andrew, Simon's Peter brother, the text says he finds a lad with a lunch, according to verse 9, and he willingly turns it over to Jesus. And I need to put a pin there. That's the real key today, is to willingly turn our situations over to Jesus. According to Shakespeare, some men are born great, some achieve greatness, and some even have greatness thrust upon them. But certainly the lad in the text of John with the bread and fish had no idea of seeking fame when he left home with the little load to go fishing. You got to understand, he had done this many mornings during his few years. But this day, the fish would not bite him. Having fished most of the day, he had caught only 2 small ones. Hungry was beckoning him to prepare his fish and eat his loaves also. But according to the text, he saw a multitude of people along the shore. So the lad had arrived just in time, and just as Jesus had sent out a committee to investigate the food resources in order that he might feed the assembled people, 5,000 of them. And only the lad had the foresight to bring his lunch that day, and by him being astonished by the prospect of feeding the 1,000 with the contents of his lunchbox, all of a sudden he contributed what he had. But at this point, fame was really thrusted upon the land. But it was not entirely circumstances that made him famous. It was his readiness to share what little he had with those in need that enabled Jesus to bless his contribution and feed the hungry people. But I got to stop and put a point there. How much we have to share is really not important if we commit it into the hands of the Lord. It can bless the multitude. And so many times we're tempted to excuse ourselves because we have so little, but in the hands of the Lord is more than enough to serve those in need. Are you going to help me here? But when you read verse 11 of John chapter 6, verse 11, Jesus takes those fishes and loaves, and somehow he looks up to heaven and says, thank you. Now that's a word to somebody today. If that's all you have in your cupboard, on your table, is sardines and crackers, peanut butter and jelly, you ought to tell him thank you. That's all you have is butter and bread. Tell him thank you. If that's all you have is syrup and biscuit, you need to tell him thank you. Later, Jesus starts to break and give to the disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. He kept breaking and giving out, breaking and giving out to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitude. Church, that's all you're doing right now is breaking and giving out. In all of our lives, he just breaking and giving out. And finally, the multitude had been fed, and now he turned to the disciples and said in chapter 12, gather up the fragments that remain, and that nothing be lost. And now the disciples must have thought, he's out of his mind. Jesus is losing it. But somehow, with only 2 little fish and 5 barley loaves of bread. Now they said he's finally pulled this thing off, and now he is finally come through. But notice verse 12, but what is he talking about? Gathering up the fragments. Now the fragment Jesus is talking about is not the half-broken pieces that's been left to be trampled in the ground. Not the pieces that had been broken, but yet not distributed out. Because the multitude had been filled. Y'all will help me preach this thing. But the Bible says they gathered up 12 baskets full of leftovers. Notice verse 13 here. Perhaps one for each of the disciples. Those are the leftovers that Jesus is talking about. And notice there was things in those leftovers that no one saw but Jesus. Go on, preach, boy. Jesus, he can do more with leftovers than we can with a basket full. I said something there. I said, Jesus can do more with leftovers than we can with a basket full. Someone said it this way, that he's the Lord of the leftovers. The reason we're here is because Jesus is able to work with leftovers. Tell somebody that's all you are is a leftover. All of us have some leftovers from our life. Don't think for one moment you're all of that in a bag of chips. Nobody here brought him a full life. You brought him something leftover. You brought him fragments. You brought him broken pieces. You brought in leftover shattered dreams and baggage and drama in your life. Baby, you came. The song says, I came to Jesus just as I was. I was weary, worn, and sad. I found in him a resting place. Another thing about this text, they tried to make him a king, according to verse 15 of John. Now look at Jesus in verse 15. He dismisses the crowd. He even constrained the disciples to get into a boat and start to the other side. Because Jesus knew they would try to take him by force and make him a king. I said something, but Jesus knew by making him a king would be false hope. And Jesus knew people are good at making you and I a king for a day. The very one that cried, Hosanna this day, will cry, crucify him the next day. You must not get beside yourself when people are speaking well about you. So don't get beside yourself when people tell you, baby, don't nobody lead that song like you. Can't nobody serve like you. Can't nobody pray and preach like you. I don't know what we would do if it wasn't for you. Folk would make you a king for a day. Folk will speak well of you today and then turn around and talk about you tomorrow. People are good at making you a king for a day. But this brings me down to my text. So he tells his disciples to get into a boat and go to the other side. And Matthew, if you read the book of Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 says, he goes up into a mountain to pray, and I can imagine in the disciples' mind, the disciples said one to another, it's been a good day. The master has taught and held the crowd spellbound. He talked well, and later they forget about even eating. And then when there was no food, he took those fishes and loaves and fed the multitude. They said, did you see their faces? He said, we've done all right getting hitched up and hooked up with this Jesus. His ministry is on the upswing. We'll sign up with the right one. It's been a good day. But I need to tell you here, maybe you're thinking that the sun will shine always. Maybe you're thinking that you really got it made. But the first thing I need to tell you today, that to know on this journey, first of all, that life reverses on this journey. Read verse 18 of John in chapter 6. The text says, and the sea arose by reason of a great storm. Life will reverse on you. The sun was now shining so bright and all was well. But now suddenly there was a shift in the wind. The situation goes from a calm to a storm. All is well one moment, but the next minute they're caught up in a storm. Life has its reverse. It reversed on them. Suddenly there's a shift in the wind, and the situation goes from a calm to a storm. All is well one moment, but the next minute they're caught up in the storm. Life will reverse on you. All can be well one moment, then all hell can break loose the next minute. The landscape in life can change on you, baby. It happened because there was a shift in the wind. The wind will shift on you. And I wonder, is anybody here other than me, and listen to me, that seeing your life go from a calm to a storm? Life reverses, and problems always come when we least expect them. The last thing they expected was a storm, because they thought they were not out there on their own. But they were out there at the command of Christ. They were out there on his command. And a storm came up. They were out there on his word. And even when you're out on the Lord's word, storm will arise. If the storm would have had come earlier, they could have handled it a little better. Earlier, the sun is shining, but now the sky is dark. Earlier, they're on dry land, but now they're in a storm. Earlier, they was right. Jesus was right there with them. but now he's nowhere to be found. Don't ever think that storm won't come your way. Life is filled with God appointed storm. And understand these squeals and surges will come across everyone's horizon. Did you hear what I said? Because God has those favorite actors who always get the leading role. Go on, preach her. Remember, in every life, some rain must fall. So remember, life has its reverses. Don't get beside yourself, baby. You have a good job and all your bills are paid. Don't think down on the next person standing in the unemployment line. Life will reverse on you. But brothers and sisters, you may know what the whereabouts of your children, but don't think less of that person who's visiting that boy or jail, or girl in prison or jail. The storm will arrive. Don't ever forget where you last laid down your umbrella. Don't forget where you last, or when you hung up, put down your raincoat. Don't forget where you last pulled off your rain boots. The storm will arrive. Life goes in cycles. There are different seasons. One season is usually more prone to storms than another. Therefore, storms are inevitable. Part of life. There's no storm so large in your life that God cannot handle. We've talked about life reverses. But look at verse 19. The next thing you will receive in life, there's life responsibilities in the storm. If you read verse 19, the Bible says, while they were in the storm, they continued to roll. This pronoun word, they, suggests to me that it seemed like at first that they were not having much success. But they continued to roll. Life demands a great effort. Even today, you may be in a storm, but you need to continue to roll. But notice, not some of them, not one or two of them, but verse 19 says, all of them continue to roll. And if the church is to be what it is to be and what God designed it to be, the church must continue to roll together. The hardest people to get along with is we people of color. One reason why we cannot get along with one another, we get bogged down in personality conflicts. We get bogged down in who is going to be president, who's going to be vice, who's going to be chairman. If it's not us or who we think ought to be leading, we're tied down before it ever gets started. But John says they continue to roll together. He does not say they even had a lead man on the boat or a man in charge. But they continue to roll. Because the root of the problem is, and the reason why we can't roll together, we don't, somebody say, I don't like him, I can't stand her, and I refuse to work with them. Go on, preach in the house. We talked about life reverses. It reverses on you. The second thing we talked about, life responsibility. You got to keep on. Walk. Thirdly, notice life redeemer. Look at verse 19. The last part of the verse, John chapter 6, verse 19. It's Jesus walking on the water, coming to them. Can I preach this today, y'all? So when they had rowed about 5 or 20 or 30 furlongs, they see Jesus walking on the sea and drawing now unto the ship, and the text said they were afraid. He somehow leaves the shore of Galilee and even does not worry about getting into a boat. He just steps out on the water and went where they were. Because the last part of verse 19 says, Jesus walking on the sea, drawing now unto the ship. But you got to notice something else. Notice the moment when he came to them. Verse 25. Matthew 14 and verse 25 talks about it's the fourth watch of the night. So the fourth watch of the night is the darkest hour before the dawn. And Matthew and Mark also tells us it's the fourth watch of the night. So Jesus the Redeemer went unto them walking on the sea in the fourth watch of the night. He might not come when you want him. Woo! But he's always on time. And Jesus at this time divided the night into 4 watches. The first was the 6th hour o'clock in the evening till 9. The second was 9 until 12. The third was from 12 to 3. And the 4th hour was 3 to 6. So in the 4th hour, he comes walking on the sea to calm the troubled waters and to bring peace to troubled soul. That's the darkest hour. He might not tell you come when you want him, but he's always on time. It's not a moment too soon nor too late. So in Matthew 8:23 and 27, the disciples had witnessed Jesus in the storm. But notice the message and means of what he uses. He uses 2 feet. He came to them the way he wanted to come. It seemed like a boat would have gotten him there faster. But notice, if he would have gotten into a boat like them, there would have been no difference between him and them. And the Bible says he walked, Sister Edwards, on the Sea of Galilee. Remember, the storm is raging. Help me preach it here to y'all today. The sign and signal of 2 feet on water is a sign and a signal of a sovereign God. And only a sovereign God can walk on water. Water walking is reserved for God alone. Water walking belongs for God alone. I guess God can walk on it since he made it. Go on, preach, Herman Jr. Since he made it, he owned it. He's alone had the right to walk on water. He walked on what they would have and could have drowned in. We drink water, bathe in water, wash our clothes with water. We wash our automobile with water. We swim in water. We ski on water. We use water to cook with. You can drown in water, but you cannot walk on water. Come on now. All right. He did not use no skis to get to them. He did not use no helicopter to let him down to them. He did not use no submarine to get to them. He even did not use a boat or ship with his name on the side. 2 feet. Walking on water. I tell you, this God of ours can be expected to come in our moment of difficulty. But as I close, but the text is telling us to teach us something else. And that is, not only can we expect God to come in moments of difficulty, but we can experience God's deliverance during those moments of problem. Thirdly, notice the Master's message. He's speaking the word of affirmation. It is I. Be not afraid. Then he's speaking the words of consolation, saying, be of good cheer. It is I. Then he's speaking words of information. Be not afraid. Time we're living in, if we need to hear words of affirmation, consolation, and information. As I close, a friend was asked who is a boat. Man, why do you keep your boat docked like this when the storm is coming? He said one reason why, some may know the obvious reason, but he asked this man who watches over boats when the storms come. He began to talk about some plastic containers and rubber ties that he put on the sides of the boats, so that when the wind blows and the water pushes the boat around from side to side, the rubber ties and plastic container protects the boat from cracking in the storm. You missed it. So the boat really belongs in a storm. We belong in the storm. He continued and said, when you move the boat from the deck and put it out in the sea, drop your anchor also, because the boat is made to handle the storm. Another keep the boat from drifting away. As a close, so when the wind of trouble is blowing and confusion is everywhere, you sail on. Because what's around you will keep you from cracking in the storm. I tell you something else, you drop your anchor and drop your anchor deep, and it won't let you drift away in the storm. That's why someone wrote the song, be not dismayed. Whatever betide, God will. Do you know him? Take care of you. Beneath his wing, love abide. God, Mary's baby. God, my wheel in the middle of the wheel. God, my midnight ride. God, my protector. He will take care of you. What you will experience on this journey in a storm. Life's reverses. You can be well one day and in the hospital the next day. But there's a responsibility, as they did in the storm. They kept on rowing. Then there's life redeemer. Jesus came to them walking on the sea. And he's still walking on troubled waters. May God bless you.